To give you an idea of my experience with account management, I will walk you through my typical duties. Regarding context, the offices in which I began my account management work had several related data tasks in disarray and scattered among several departments and assigned to different people. This resulted in bottlenecks and rework and duplication of work both within a process and among different people doing the same job. So a critical order of business was to pull all of those several related data tasks into one cohesive, seamless procedure operated by one person. This involved writing account setup procedures and tasks and creating data load and data destruction standard operating procedure. I developed tools to make tasks easier, faster, and having better quality and tracking for coworkers. I created documentation and detailed checklists for client setup and for the start, duration, and conclusion of the client agreement. I reinvented back-end operations, including creation of new databases, data processing procedures, and audits. The process that I am explaining in this chapter is the result of this groundwork. Notably, new account managers who came after me also followed these procedures that I set up. I will first give you an overview of my account management, then show samples of my actual work. In summary, I did the account setup preliminary tasks where I entered the new client setup as a project in the project management system so that this status was communicated to the team. Then I created relevant client directories, and finally I created the client profile. After this infrastructure work was done, I contacted my client data center contact, gave them the data requirements, reviewed the data requirements, and requested and obtained test data from them. The physician specialty and group was obtained from our clinical outcomes consultants, so I requested that data from them. Once I had all required data in hand, I set up the table specific to the client. Prior to the live load of the test data, I performed a high-level visual data check in order to immediately catch any obvious erroneous data, ensuring that it appeared, for example, that all required data elements were present, such as the patient IDs in one file match those in another, unique identifiers were not duplicated, several diagnoses and procedures were submitted, dates and physicians were included with the procedures. The associated physician specialty made sense as it related to the patient procedure, room revenue data were included, and all reference data were included, such as physician, payer, race, admission type, admission source, and discharge status. Each client had a customized load script, so I wrote this according to the nuances of their data specifically. I processed the data to check for good data integrity. When it was confirmed that the data had good integrity, I proceeded to complete the client setup process. I requested historical baseline data from the contact at the hospital. I set up a regular data submission timeline with the client for new data going forward. I confirmed that I had received the physician specialty and group from our clinical outcomes consultants. I notified the client consultant, project manager, and IT contacts of good data available. I documented load instructions and any client-specific anomalies in the client profile, and I updated client-specific dates and indicators in the database. After this initial setup, I guaranteed timely data submission and verified good data integrity throughout the duration of the contract, was available to the contacts at the hospital and our internal consultants and team for any need and ad hoc request, and I destroyed client data when required according to standard operating procedure if my company was not authorized to keep the data after the contract expiration. So I will scroll through a sample of my work. This is the account setup checklist, the visual data checklist, and other supporting checklist for the client setup. A worksheet when data have good integrity, and the client profile with information relevant to the client at that time, such as comprehensive contact information, data file information, the hospital system and group information, comprehensive data submission information, and client-specific load processing instruction, anomalies, and comments in general. All of this information was kept in a centralized location for the client that was known to everyone so that if, for example, I as the account manager was not available, everyone knew they could reference the documentation provided in order to get required work complete in my absence. Documentation such as this that I make readily and knowingly available has been and continues to be one of my strong assets. Regarding this, one of my coworkers once wrote in a letter of recommendation for me, quote, "Besides her technical knowledge and drive, I believe one of her greatest assets was her ability to create and document processes that were efficient and could be replicated by others as needed. It can be harrowing to have a critical member of the team take vacation, but with Janine, I knew that if we ran into any hardships during her absence, her documentation would clearly explain what needed to be done to rectify any problem," end quote. Then, in my next sample of work, I have a few standard operating procedures, one for FTP account setup, another for client data loads, and another for destruction of client data. While the standard operating procedure that I am showing here is somewhat out of date, so it will reference some old technology or old way of doing things. For example, in general, I do not store hard copy records anymore, only soft copy records. The overall flow is a good representation of the typical standard operating procedure that you can expect from me. Also, another point to note here is my chosen tool of documentation. Here I chose spreadsheets for the checklist, logs, and client profile, and simple standalone documents for the standard operating procedure. This is because this means made the most sense given the circumstances of our team. I do choose whatever tool makes the most sense on a case-by-case basis. And I choose the simplest tool possible that gets the job done well and that has the least amount of maintenance required. Factors that I consider in tools utilized for documentation is who will be accessing the tool and who will be manipulating, changing, and updating the documentation. Are they or are they not technical? How large is the documentation? How and where will it be accessed? And how often are updates required and expected? For example, some documentation I will put in a database and extract it dynamically if, for instance, it will be referenced in multiple locations or in different presentations. And if someone technical is managing that documentation and maintaining it in that database, will have as minimal effort as possible as opposed to other tools used for documentation. Other times, a forum or project management system makes more sense. The takeaway here is that I do choose the best mode of documentation given the setting. Moving on, I have the data requirements document. This is a manual where I documented company product data and project requirements. It was used by not only client administrative and data personnel staff, but also our company sales, consultant, and management teams in order to accurately scope the needs of the project. It is a proactive tool that anticipates both internal and external questions about the project and that assists in short turnaround time data collection. Therefore, it is an example of my clear documented expectations for a project that answers questions upfront, resulting in streamlined project setup for each client. First, we have the table of contents. The first section gives an overview of the product and this document as related to the product, and it gives helpful contact information for the company. It goes over what is required in a data contact at the hospital and both the initial and ongoing data submission schedules, including expected timelines, file format specifications and data transfer options, specific specifications for every data element requested, including de-identification instructions for protected health information and indicating that data is for every inpatient record. Reference data specifications, including their use case, other reference data specifications, a checklist for data submission that we encourage the client to employ. Here I wrote, quote, below is a schedule to use prior to the first data submission. It lists items that we have found useful for the hospital data contact to check before sending data. If the checklist is used, then it may reduce or eliminate the number of times that data are rejected in the setup process due to being incomplete or having bad integrity, end quote. So again, this is our effort to be proactive and reduce or eliminate problems in the data submission. Finally, we have a facts page to which we can easily add if and when new facts arise. I believe that is plenty of information for this chapter. I will proceed to show more of the technical procedures and the audit report for my account management in the next chapter.